Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elif Can, and I'm a member of the European University of Brain and Technology, NeurotechEU Student Council. I'm a currently second-year PhD student at Boğaziçi University Institute of Biomedical Engineering. And I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining for us the International Women's Day event hosted by the Student Council of NeurotechEU. Firstly, I would like to introduce NeurotechEU, the European University of Brain and Technology. The core objective of NeurotechEU is to establish a collaborative network of excellence in brain research and technology, aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of European education, research, economy, and society. The alliance consists of 8 members and several research and industrial partners. And about the Student Council, we officially formed in the autumn 2020, and we represent students' interests across NeurotechEU work packages and board of governors. Here, there is representation from all alliance universities working on different aspects of furthering the mission of NeurotechEU. We have a collective student body exceeding 170,000 individuals, and we are determined in our commitment to fostering excellence in brain research and technology, to foster European competitiveness across education, research, economy, and society. So today, as we commemorate the International Women's Day, we celebrate the remarkable accomplishment.
Elif, didn't want to interrupt, but the slides are not changing. If you wanted to show multiple slides.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Actually, it should be the first page right now. But thank you. Okay, today, as we are celebrating the International Women's Day, we celebrate the remarkable accomplishments from the women across various academic disciplines, especially. And our aim here is to raise awareness and take concrete steps against biases and inequalities. This marks the 4th consecutive year of the Women's Day events, and while last year's in-person gathering was a success, this year we wanted to continue this with a virtual event. Throughout the day, we will have an array of inspiring talks lined up. We will feature women who have excelled in academia, and I encourage you to actively engage in the breakout sessions and seize the opportunity to ask questions and expand your professional networks. It's essential to stay engaged until the very end. And I must also emphasize that today's meeting will be recorded for future references. So let's go over today's schedule. We have a rector's lecture as an opening, and after that we will hear from the speakers. We will have a short break after listening about the careers of the speakers, and after that we will have the panel discussion sessions. After the panel discussions, you can ask your questions during the panel, and we will discuss those questions after the session. And for the breakout room session, we will have different topics such as family planning, glass ceilings, and funding and applications. And lastly, we will conclude at around 14:30 Central European time. I want to introduce to you our lecture's speech. Professor Dr. Anca Dena Buzianu, who is the rector from the University of Medicine and Pharmacy of Cluj in Romania. She was the first female rector in Romania, and she also gave the opening talk last year. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us live today, but she recorded her contribution for us, so we will watch it together. Is this audible to you all? Okay,
Yes.
no complaints. I think, yeah, great.
Good. Yeah.
Evenimentul a reunit cercetătoare și femei implicate în conducerea universităților prestigioase din consorțiul Neurotech. Am avut-o pe doamna rector de a Universității din Reykjavik, pe doamnele prorector de la universitățile din Lille, din Bogazici, din Elche, Spania, care fiecare ne-au arătat problemele pe care le-au întâmpinat de-a lungul carierei și am tras concluzia că de fapt aceste probleme sunt aceleași și în același timp s-au identificat și soluții pentru ca pe viitor, pentru tineri și pentru cei care urmează după noi, egalitatea de șanse, egalitatea de gen să fie într-adevăr realizată în toate domeniile activității noastre. Să știți că sfaturile pe care le-au oferit invitatele au fost de mare valoare și în același timp foarte utile. Stimați și distinși colegi, este o mare bucurie pentru mine să vă vorbesc astăzi, în această zi specială, Ziua Internațională a Femeii, din postura de cercetător, profesor, dar mai ales din postura de femeie. Sunt mândră să mă număr printre femeile care, prin ambiție, multă muncă și încredere în propriile forțe, au reușit să producă schimbări în domenii importante ale științei și educației, atât la nivel național cât și internațional. Pasiunea, viziunea și perseverența feminină au produs schimbări importante în societatea ultimilor ani. Îmbinând curiozitatea, studiul, observația, atenția la detalii și răbdarea, contribuția femeilor în toate domeniile, nu doar în știință, este astăzi un fapt de necontestat, care a schimbat de-a lungul timpului percepția generală asupra capacităților femeilor. Prin implicarea în lumea științei, femeile pot beneficia de posibilități de carieră fantastice și de ocazia de a schimba cu adevărat ceva pentru societate și pentru viitor. Le doresc mult succes și cât mai multe realizări deosebite tuturor femeilor implicate în cercetarea științifică și, în special, tuturor colegelor noastre din cadrul proiectului NeurotechEU. Celor aflați la început de drum sau care doresc să acceadă către o carieră în cercetare, le transmit să aibă curaj și încredere în propriile forțe, să fie îndrăzneți și să nu-și abandoneze visul. Tuturor doamnelor și domnișoarelor aș vrea să le mulțumesc pentru puterea, voința și bunătatea pe care o oferă lumii în fiecare zi, indiferent de domeniul lor de activitate.
Okay, that was a great talk. So after listening to a female rector from Romania, as we will delve into the rest of today's talk, I will now invite Vivek, a second-year PhD student at Thunder Center for Neuroscience, Radboud University. He's studying the whole brain dynamics in stroke. And before proceeding, I'd like to remind you that you can utilize the Q&A section in the Zoom for any questions you might have during the talks. And following the speaker's presentation, we will endeavor to invite all individuals with questions to join us on stage for the further discussion. So Vivek, you can take it on from here.
Thank you, Olive. I hope everyone can hear me pretty good, clear, and so I would like to welcome everyone again to the 4th NeurotechEU International Women's Day event. I just wanted to make a note before that this event is being recorded for the GDPR-related compliance. So if in case anyone has any concerns, you can just let us know, and from the recording we can remove later. And okay, so I think we don't have any further information to share. So I think we can just simply jump to our panel discussion for today. And for the first speaker, we have Pinar, who is a professor at the Boğaziçi University in Turkey. I'm sorry for murdering the names. And her research encompasses the multimodal brain imaging and the systemic physiology and signal dynamics. So yeah, we are looking forward to hear it from you.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Hope you can hear me. So I will now.
Yeah, we can.
I can't share my slides for now at least, but
You should be able to share it now.
okay. I guess it should be on.
Yes.
Okay, so it's great to be here. And I'm also really excited because this is also kind of a first time I'm giving such a presentation more on the journey, not really on the research side. So it won't be hopefully so boring. So currently I'm at the Institute of Biomedical Engineering at Boğaziçi University and leading multimodal imaging and physiology lab. And now I will try to explain you how I ended up here basically. So starting with a world map, everything started in Turkey. And even in a city called Antalya, you many of you have been or heard about it. So that's not an agency like a tourism introduction, but it has nice features. I grew up in a town called Manavgat, and also studied till end of high school basically. And I was always interested in math, science, biology, and physics, but also kind of a social kid as well. So I wanted to call myself like a socially nerd. And so at high school, it was more of a trend going towards medical school if you were kind of successful, but I was more interested in the engineering and math science. So that brought me to Boğaziçi University Chemical Engineering Department indeed, as a mixture of many basic science and the field of engineering. So I joined the chemical engineering around 2004, and the whole undergrad took around 5 years basically. So I was in the track of process engineering, so really designing plants and big factories, and so did a couple of internships in industry, like in pharmaceutical, brewing, or also R&D at Unilever. But at some point, I realized, at least in Turkey, this research side was a little bit limited in the industry, but not the development was still okay. But the research part, I wanted to more involved actually. And there was also I also had a chance to still socialize in the university, like diving, sailing, and all those were actually we could do at the university. So we were lucky students indeed. And coming back to the education part, so I wanted to do a bit more on the research side. And Elif Hoca, that she was my undergrad supervisor, and actually I was her first student indeed. And she introduced me to the world of more bioinformatics, computational biology, a little bit away from the huge factories and the design part of chemical engineering. And thanks to her, I learned how to read a paper, how to interpret the results and discussion, and so on and so forth, basically. So, and actually there I got excited about more on the computational side of the world and try to find a way to a bit towards an interdisciplinary field, actually, that I can combine my interest. And so following graduation at 2009, I wanted to continue with a master's degree, a little bit more interdisciplinary, such that I can find my way. So those were like the keywords that I wanted, like computational, steel engineering. I wanted to stay in Europe, tuition free, and also English speaking. So where can I end up like that? So that brought me to Germany. So that was the master's degree was computational science and engineering. And it was an international English program, and it was just those times, first or second year actually of the program. And that was such a nice environment. So covering all those aspects indeed. And there, during that time, I continued to do multiple internships and working in different departments, because once you are in an interdisciplinary field, there are like pros and cons. You're trying to find your way, basically. And during my last year, there was the GE Global Research at our campus. And there I spent around a year, both as an intern, student, and a master's thesis. And this is how I ended up in the field of MRI, actually. So initially, they were just looking for a student capable of doing programming skills. But actually, the lab was on medical imaging in MRI. So I ended up in the laboratory part as well. And following graduation, I thought I found my way. So I want to do a PhD in MRI, still computational engineering, I want to stay in Europe. But I want to move towards brain, because basically my master's thesis was more on the abdominal side. So, but my interest was actually more on the neuro side. So then, of course, the huge challenging part started: how to apply for a PhD, the CV, research, and writing motivational letters, and so on and so forth. That took a while. But I was glad and happy that I found a nice position and got accepted at ETH Zurich in collaboration with University Hospital Zurich. And that project was also on brain, quantitative susceptibility mapping. It was a rather novel technique, sensitive to iron and myelin, so we could image the brain in higher quality, and that can be applied to like MS, Alzheimer's, and so on. So I was involved in various projects there. My track was biomedical engineering, and also had a chance to enjoy the beautiful Switzerland and Zurich for around 5 years, basically. And those were roughly the research projects I was involved, from simulations to applications to tumor quantification, and also some improvements within hardware systems. So I had a chance to be involved in various aspects of MRI, but all in neuroimaging, basically. And then also I was lucky that I could join various conferences, and finally had multiple collaborations that I could work together for 5 years, and of course continued afterwards. And that was also the first page of my thesis, which was the puzzle of my brain. And so that was like a nice memory actually from those times. So following my PhD, so my advisor at that time, he told me that I think it's time to move away from Europe now. So it's enough that you stick around Europe, you should go and look for other opportunities. So that brought me to the United States, USA. So I was there for around, again, 5 years under section of advanced MRI. And there I was more on the fMRI, so the neuroimaging part, really more on the functional side that I was highly interested in. And so this is a really funny photo of the lab, indeed, looking like from the 50s, and they still didn't change it. I just can't believe. So this is the beautiful campus of NIH and the clinical center. In this huge center, we were, of course, again in the basement at by -1 level here. That's the destiny of MRI. And but the campus was so big and beautiful. So there's research going on there. Lots of research, also clinical studies, and it also has its own grant mechanism, as many of you know. So basically, there I was involved in really exciting projects, more on multimodal imaging side. So this brings us to my current topic, actually. So more on the EEG, fMRI, sleep, physiology, how those affect each other, and many other exciting projects I was lucky to be involved. And that brought up a couple of papers that we published together with the lab there on, mostly you can see like sleep and physiology, and also like alertness and other topics that are like common in multimodal imaging, basically. So following my postdoc, those are a couple of other pictures I wanted to show you. So of course, huge thanks to all my collaborators from there and the PI, Jeff. So this is the kitchen area. So I am coffee addict I can call myself. That was also painting that I've done, and I was part of a brain art competition. Didn't win it, but sometimes even being participating was fun. So drip coffee fresh from the sky, I called it that time. So without coffee, I don't know I could if I could be where I am now, to be honest. And so basically, following the postdoc, which also took at around 5 years. Well, there was COVID during the last 2 years. I'm sure that also affected my mood and being alone and looking myself for for around 1 to 2 years and thinking what I really want to do. Actually, I realized maybe it's time to move back home and try what I really want to do at home first. So actually, biomedical engineering department in Boğaziçi University was my, to be honest, one and only choice and where I wanted to be. So then the story started with, of course, the application and so on and so forth. So I moved back around a year and a half, 2 years ago. And basically, I feel lucky to be here. So I also received a grant. And then that brought me that I could purchase my own equipment for the lab. Currently, that I can do EEG fMRI experiments, set up my own lab with many beautiful students, as Elif is one of them as well. And so currently we are able to conduct our own EEG fMRI studies with exciting experiment setups at the hospital. We are collaborating together, and we are now currently like more than 10 in the lab, so growing and growing. At some point, hope will stabilize for a while. And in addition to that, we are also part of a 70 preclinical study, and so this is also the team of sub-team of the multimodal imaging group, focusing on preclinical imaging. So I don't know if it took 15 minutes, but I didn't count the time. But so basically, I am happy to be part of this beautiful team. And actually, so just scrolling through, I think we have right to celebrate our international Women's Day with number of female students in the lab. You can see. And also same is true with the BME. Actually, I can tell the same for the faculty and student members of the BME at Boğaziçi University. So that was all from my side. Thanks a lot again for the invitation. I'm glad to be part of NeurotechEU. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And since Dr. Özbay is my PI, I would like to extend thank you especially. And I learned some aspects that I didn't know before. It's great to be a part of your lab, and I think you have put together a great team in such short time. And thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot again. It was so amazing to see the journey. So I think we can. So do we have to wait for the questions if anyone has, or we can just move to the.
If anyone has any questions, they can, I think, write in the Q&A box. But if none,
Okay,
we
then
can go ahead. And if there will be, we will just after answer them, basically.
all right. So for the next talk, we have Christiana, who is a professor at Karolinska Institute in Sweden. And her research explores the impact of the environment on human brain development and the long-term outcomes of these exposures on mental health. And today she will talk about her career journey. And with that, we warmly welcome Christiana.
Hi, thank you for including me in this event. I'm very happy to be a part of it. Let me try to share. Okay. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, do you see my? Oh, displays. Yes.
Yeah. Now we have the notes window also. Previously, it was
Okay.
Yeah.
It was okay previously. Very good. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so I prepared something similar to the previous speaker. We'll see. I'm happy to fill in the gaps with some questions later on. So I thought of titling this talk Critical Developmental Periods in Life, Career, and Research, as it's the critical developmental periods are the topic of my research, but of course the topic of everyone's life, and including mine. So yes, as you mentioned, I'm currently an assistant professor at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and I've been here for about a year and a half. And I started my lab in September 2022. There's a picture of our lab, and our group is called the Developmental Translational Neurobiology Group. So I put together a bit of a trajectory of my life and career, and I think it will be the pattern of all the talks, there's a lot of moving around countries and continents. So I was born in Romania, and I lived there until 15 years old when my parents decided to move to the United States. So it wasn't a career move, it was just a life throws things your way. So I moved to the United States. I lived on the East Coast near Boston, and I went to high school there as well as starting university at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And then about halfway through my bachelor's degree, my parents decided to move to Canada, and I decided to follow them. So I got my bachelor's degree in molecular biology from University of Guelph in Canada, and then decided to go for a PhD at McGill University, which is in Montreal, Canada. In the Canadian structure, one can skip the master's or kind of do a continuous master's PhD program, and that's what I did over a period of about 6.5 years. And I completed that in 2016. And then I moved on to a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute for Psychiatry in Germany, in Munich. And I was there for about 6 years, and then started my faculty position. I also put my ages at the time, so you get an idea of kind of how old one can be during this career trajectories. I also mentioned I had 2 kids along the way. And again, for the career planning, I'm having to discuss in more detail, but I sort of planned my life and my career in such a way that my kids came toward the end of either my PhD or my postdoc, and I was able to take some parental leave during those times. Like everybody else, the COVID-19 pandemic reared its ugly head, and that was kind of overlapping with one of my maternity leave periods, as well as the transition from postdoc to faculty. So that was an interesting period in my career, and stressful, just like for everyone else. In a way, very much motivated my research goals and how I've developed my research group moving forward. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm interested in. So I'm interested in the prenatal period specifically, and how the environment shapes who we become. I think that's very topical right now. It's particularly interesting to me as a mother, as a scientist who comes from a background of psychiatry and stress, and you'll hear about that in a minute. So environmental exposures can be anything, can be chemical, can be behavioral. A lot of things related to the mental health of a pregnant woman can be transmitted to the developing child. So what does that mean for the next generation? So like I mentioned, the pandemic, there was a big, before we knew everything that was involved in the transmission of exposures, it was very scary to be pregnant at that time. And actually, I was pregnant right at the peak of the pandemic. So my second child was born in April 2020, when basically the whole world was shut down. And, we were talking about pandemic babies and what will it be like for them. And turns out it's all good. This is her at 2 years old. She's almost 4 now, but she's having a great time. So that's turned out all right for us, but certainly motivated me in my career journey. So I mentioned I've been interested in mental illness and stress, and that's been quite important for me throughout my career. Early in my career, I worked with a group that focused on suicide, and of course, suicide is the most devastating outcome of mental illnesses. And in this plot, you can see the past 20 years of progress in different chronic diseases that affect our society to a great degree. And we don't seem to have managed to improve the outcomes of suicide. In fact, it seems to be increasing. So there's certainly a lot of work to be done in the mental health space, and particularly associated to women's issues. Important to mention today is that the prevalence of depressive or anxiety disorders is actually increasing in the population. Again, bringing back to the pandemic, we saw a disproportionate effect on women. I don't know if you can quite see this plot, but here we have so we've got females here and males here, and you certainly can see that women are affected more. So that, like I said, motivated my drive to understand what's happening. So throughout my career and now in my group, we're interested in understanding mental illness from susceptibility to treatment. So mental illness exists at the level of populations as well as at the level of individual cells. So we have to consider all aspects of it. We think of mental illnesses as mostly adult phenotypes and about their treatment. But of course, how do they get there? There's a combination of genetic and environmental factors, and certainly exposures during critical periods play a very important role. So during early life, adolescence, it's particularly important what kind of stressors one undergoes in order to develop their risk or resilience for mental illness. Another critical period is actually the pregnancy, where previously it was believed that the fetus is more or less protected during this developmental period in the uterus, but in fact, we know that a lot of different exposures can pass from the mother to the fetus. So we really want to understand those. But stepping just a little bit back into my trajectory and how I got there. So I mentioned that I got my bachelor's degree in Canada, and then I decided to go for graduate studies. I applied in a few places in Canada. I wanted to stay in Canada at the time, and I got accepted at McGill University for initially for a master's that then transitioned into a PhD. And so one can do it's called a qualifying exam to pass to the PhD. I worked under the supervision of Gustavo Turecki and Guy Rouleau. Gustavo is the head of the Suicide Brain Bank that's hosted at the in Montreal, and thus I got the opportunity to work with postmortem brains from individuals who had suffered from mental illnesses throughout their life. And we did a lot of work trying to understand molecular mechanisms in the postmortem brain. My specific focus was on bipolar disorder, but I also studied major depression and other psychiatric disorders. I also became interested in the effect of medications that are used in psychiatric disorders and how those how response to them happens in mood disorders and how they shape brain development as well as other aspects of brain function. And I also contributed to a large collaborative work looking at pharmacogenomics of bipolar disorder, where we did whole genome sequencing in a few hundred individuals from families with high prevalence of this disorder. And now that data is part of a consortium that has actually had the opportunity to use it in many different publications and making a lot of contributions. I also put here some information about sort of the achievements throughout this period. I think it's important to consider the timeline of one's career and the metrics that we use in academia for success, publications and funding. So throughout my career, I've always tried to apply for funding and got a head start. And I had mentors who supported me in applying. And I started with something like, a travel award here and there for maybe not a large value, and then got to fund my entire PhD salary with independent funding from the Canadian Funding Agency, as well as some other agencies. And that was a very good thing to do during my PhD. And that's why I mention it, to encourage you all to think about that, because it really developed my writing skills, my understanding of how to present oneself as a scientist and to present my research. And I didn't put it here, but during my time as a PhD student, I also got involved in student government, for example. I was president of our department student society for a couple of years, and I just really like to see, let's say, how the sausage is made, is the expression, basically get behind the doors and see how things work in academia. So then for my postdoc, I became interested in, like I said, in my PhD, I really studied adult phenotypes, terminal aspects of these complex disorders, including in postmortem brains. And so I really wanted to go a bit further back and understand how do they get there? How do we develop these disorders? We know that genetics play a role. We know that environment plays a role. So how can we break it apart and understand the contributions from the different aspects from the very early stages? And so I actually applied broadly, or looked, searched for a postdoc broadly, and I wasn't geographically constrained at this time. I ended up finding a really good fit at the Max Planck Institute for Psychiatry with Elizabeth Binder, who's the director, who's one of the directors there. And her lab focuses on stress and psychiatry. And so in her group, I worked on developing expertise in brain organoids, which were quite new at the time when I started in 2016. They had just been developed, and we managed to publish a couple of really interesting papers looking at environmental effects in brain organoids, specifically related to stress hormones. And I also had the opportunity to get involved in studies relating to the placenta and how this tissue is involved in stress and psychiatric disorders through collaborations with groups in Finland and Germany who followed longitudinal human cohorts, and we got to look at biological aspects of placenta development as well. And other contributions during this time have been some resources that we built. We used a lot of high throughput sequencing techniques, and we published these works as accessible resource for other researchers to also have use them. Again, I mentioned here my publications and funding outcomes. I continued to apply for funding, and at the postdoctoral level in Europe, one has a lot of opportunities for funding, but it's a work in progress. So, for example, I had applied to the Marie Curie funding scheme twice, and I didn't get it the first year, and I kept trying, and I got it the second year. And that was very good for me to further develop my writing skills. And also, I had funding from the Canadian agency called Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship, and that was important in allowing me to have paid parental leave, for example. Whereas, depending on what country you are, the structure of parental leave might be different. Okay. Yeah, so a theme throughout my career has been to study molecular processes, and I'm really interested in developing human brains, but of course one does not have access to a developing human in live. So then you have to be creative as to how we can develop those research studies. So of course rodents have been highly used. However, there are some differences in the biology, the tissue architecture, and some of the functions in really early development. One issue being that placenta biology is quite different between humans and rodents, as well as developmental periods. And also at the brain level, rodents have lissencephalic, smooth brains. Humans have gyrencephalic, folded brains, which means that there are actually specific cell types and tissue architecture that is not recapitulated across species. So in order to study very human specific phenotypes, we can put together different biological sources of information, peripheral samples, postmortem brains, perinatal tissues like placenta. And what we do a lot in my lab is develop in vitro systems, either three-dimensional or two-dimensional, in order to study these important tissues. And with this strategy, kind of put together an entire perspective of the developing fetus. So it's this is just kind of outlines my lab's vision and structure. So we're really interested in developmental peers, like I said, specifically related to maternal stress. We study hormones involved in the stress response. We study psychotropic medications that would be prescribed for something like depression or anxiety, and inflammation markers. And we do so by focusing on the brain, which is the final source of our outcome interest, as well as the placenta, which is the transmission organ, and particularly understudied and extremely interesting part of our biology. We use in vitro modeling systems. We also, via collaborations, work with human longitudinal cohorts, as well as national health registries from actually now all the Nordic countries. We're very lucky to have collaborators who help to contribute to this multimodal vision. And we use advanced molecular biology techniques like transcriptomics, epigenomics, microscopy techniques, and so on. And here there's three sort of research lines that I won't go into detail, but we're basically interested to see how agents of stress exposure are being transmitted from the mother to the fetus. How do they get to the brain, and what do they do for brain architecture change, and eventually putting these together so that we reduce the use of animals in research and rather use in vitro methods that are human derived. I mentioned we collaborate with a lot of people. This map just puts some stars where we have collaborators. We have a very strong network in Australia, United States, Canada, and different parts of Europe. And that comes from my journey throughout this, throughout the globe, and having picked up people along the way who became not only friends, but excellent collaborators. And we are now a science family that we contribute different aspects to these complex research studies. And I think especially related to mental illness or brain studies, it is so key to look at our research questions from multidisciplinary points of view. And certainly that's been part of my journey. So as I mentioned, I'm currently an assistant professor. I'm group leader for the developmental and translational biology group. We're a small group and developing. We're focusing on prenatal stress exposures and how do those lead to neurodevelopment and health outcomes. We look at things from physiological point of view in terms of cortisol and cytokines as exposures, as well as from a pharmacological point of view, studying antidepressants, synthetic glucocorticoids that are used during pregnancy, as well as cannabinoids through collaboration. This is my lab and some alumni on the bottom. This is us bowling recently. And yeah, we are a small group and we're having fun. And here's what we look like when we're having fun. And so it's really a pleasure to talk here today. I'm happy to answer questions if people are curious, as well as I'd encourage you to, see how other people have modeled their careers. Some of it is serendipitous. Some of it can be planned. And so, yeah, I'm happy to discuss on what things are possible or not and how it was for me. So thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for the great talk, Dr. Christiana. It was really inspiring for us to find about your successful journey. And as you also brought to our attention, it is indeed important to take into consideration the timeline of life events when like evaluating one's academic success in terms of different metrics. And by you looking at your timeline, I really admired your research journey and how you managed to be productive while you were having a family on the side. Thank you for this inspiring talk again.
My pleasure.
We have a question in the chat box.
Okay.
What was the major difficulty you encountered during your careers? To both speakers, this question is addressed to.
Sorry, again?
What was the major difficulty you encountered during your career?
Hard to say. I think things come, I think there's many different things. I think one thing I guess I didn't mention, which is a challenge for a lot of people in academia, is that, of course, I didn't do this alone. I have a partner, luckily. I mean, of course, people also do it alone, but I have a partner who's also in academia. So we had to also match our timelines and our sort of a possibility for success along the way so that both partners could have a career and pursue it. And I think we've been lucky that that's worked out. But there's a lot of luck and serendipity involved. But in our case, we planned it very detailed. So for example, we planned when we had our children, we planned where to go, how long to stay in different places. And it was challenging, I think, to line it up.
It must have took a rigorous planning to accomplish this as two people, especially. Also, Dr. Pınar, I think the question is also addressed to you, if you want to answer.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would probably say being away from family, friends, and constantly moving every other 3 to 5 years, and also kind of then being away yet to your newest friends as well. So just settling again and again was the most challenging and also the exciting part. But at some point, it may get tricky indeed. So I would say that was the part.
I'm always curious about how people manage to socialize when they constantly move. Like when you just establish your social environment and then you move, you try to...
Yeah, you eventually find people like yourself, and you just get to be friends who are also constantly moving, so things get easier. You understand each other better in that way.
Yeah, luckily there are older people. We have another question. I think for Dr. Christiana, how did you manage to fit 14 first author papers in your PhD career? Thank you.
Yeah, this is my student who asked this, by the way. I'm calling you out. I was lucky, but also I think I had time. So my PhD was more than 6 years. Well, I also had a parental leave break in there, but I think here in Europe, the PhDs are much shorter. So in Canada, we have PhDs that are 6 years standard. And so then you have a lot more time to develop. And by the end, you're more like a postdoc, if you've had the right opportunities. So that's been the reason for me. I think in the Swedish environment here, we have 4 years limited PhDs. I see it very difficult for people to get that many first author publications. So I think the expectation should be set to the reality of your system. Yeah.
You just raised the expectation for all of us, but I think it's also important to take into consideration the time limitation, as not everywhere it lasts 6 years.
Absolutely. And it depends on the size of publications. Some of those were very small, some of them were reviews. And so one has to, if you publish one big paper, that's very successful.
I think you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for the answers and thank you for the talk. We might proceed with the other speakers, I guess.
Yeah, I think so let me welcome the next one. For the next, we have Dr. Cornelia, who's a professor at Bonn University in Germany. And her lab focuses on the neural basis of episodic memory and imagination. And she will also talk about her career journey with us. So welcome, Dr. Cornelia.
Everyone, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this round, and I'm very honored to speak here. I didn't prepare any slides, so I just tell you a little bit about my career and how I ended up here where I am.
Sure.
Before I do so, I thought about what were the key stones, because the first speaker said that hardworking, ambitions, perseverance is really important. But for me, I think it was also a lot of luck, like a lot of being there at the right moment, at the right time, sending the email that then came to turn out. So luck, fun, and something also along the line, just do it somehow. Anyhow, so I start with my high school. I was born in Germany, and during my high school, I was really interested in philosophical questions. So I remember I like to think about who are we really, and who am I, and things like that. My least favorite subject in high school was English. So I could have never imagined having an English last name now. Exactly. And so with my philosophical ideas and interest, I started to study psychology in the north of Germany, in Bremen. And there, I think that was this key topic of biological psychology. So then actually our brain in part determines how we feel, and what emotions we have, what memories we have. And that really fascinated me. But then I thought psychology, especially in Bremen, was a lot of theoretical topics, and I wanted to study more about the brain and the actual neuroscience part of it. So I decided to study medicine in addition to psychology, because I thought, oh, I really need to know about the body, not only the mind. And then after, I think, 2 years of psychology, I switched to medicine in Hamburg then. And with medicine is a challenging subject, but nonetheless, all of a sudden, the mind and the philosophical part was gone. So I decided to study psychology concurrently to medicine. And at first, the university said, no, you can't do this because you can only study in Germany one of those topics that you actually need a certificate to get involved in the studies. But I said, nah, that hasn't been written anywhere. So I would really like to do this. And then I did get a permission to study both psychology and medicine at the same time. And that was really nice. And I liked psychology, and I also finished psychology with a master in memory. But what was tricky for me was then I couldn't speak English very well. I said before, I didn't like English very much. I dropped it at school as early as possible. But now I got to the challenging part where all the research was in English, and I really needed to focus on improving that. So after my master's in psychology, I thought, no, I need to spend some time in some English-speaking country to improve this. And I was citing during my master's thesis, I wrote this on face memory. And I cited a person in Canada, in Toronto, Maurice Moscovich, I cited a lot. And so I just wrote him an email and said, I would like to do a research internship with you for 6 months or so. And would it be okay if I come over? And he wrote back immediately and said, yeah, come on over, no problem. And so I did. I went to Canada for 6 months, to Toronto. That was in 2006, I believe. Exactly. Yeah, and in Canada, I found my husband there, and therefore also the English last name. And this ended up to be not only 6 months research stay. I returned to Germany to finish my medical degree. But then back then I had a long-term relationship between Hamburg and Toronto for 3 years, juggling finishing my medical degree, doing in part research at the University of Toronto, and seeing my husband along the lines. And after my medical studies, I then went to Canada to do my PhD there. And we had our first child in Canada, my daughter, who is now 11 years old. And that was a really nice time. So I remember that I really liked just being involved in research and the research community in Canada. I found it very inspiring, and there were a lot of meetings with memory researchers. So there were, I don't know, some Ebbinghaus rounds and whatnot, so all dedicated to memory research. And in the end, I think my PhD was about 4 years. But together with the time that I spent there before, I must have been somehow like 7, 8 years in Canada. And yeah, that was a really nice time. I really fondly remember that. My actual PhD supervisor was a woman, Mary Pat McAndrews, and we studied the neural networks of episodic memory in epileptic patients. So how does medial temporal lobe epilepsy, especially to the hippocampus, impact memory networks? Yeah, and then after my PhD and 1 kid, we were looking for a postdoc, and especially my husband said he would like to move from Canada. I was actually quite happy there, but he said, no, I have grown up here and you have the experience of moving around. Let's go somewhere together. And it turned out to be London in the UK. So we moved there, and I did a postdoc with Eleanor Maguire there. And that was also quite work intensive, and also a little bit difficult actually. Because at that time we did have a child, and a child in London is not quite easy. We were forced to go quite far outside the city so we could afford to live there, and then we had a long commute back and forth to the universities. But the postdoc, the work itself was also quite amazing. We had lots of different technology. My main work is also on fMRI and memory networks. And we spent in total 4.5 years in London commuting, and in part it was really we had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, and then we had to ride our bike 20 kilometers into London City. And the other partner would then bring the kid to the childminder, and then at the afternoon it turned back and things. So it was stressful, but also nice. In the UK, I also had my second daughter in 2016, and she's now 7 years old. And they're both somehow born abroad in international environments. But they're happy and good. Exactly. So that was my postdoctoral phase. And then after the postdoc, there was also a difficult moment. So it was 2018. My postdoc had been successful, but I had to now think about whether I actually do apply for professorships or come back to medical school. So I had finished medical school, but I didn't work clinically yet. And my husband is also an academic, so 2 academic careers is very tricky. And we thought it's good and it looks all fine, and we are happy, but what if the funding doesn't work out? What if science doesn't work out? What if we don't get any positions anywhere in the same city? And so I decided to do a residency in psychiatry, because that would give me a job pretty much anywhere I would like to go very quickly. And we decided to go to Bonn, to Germany. So I made a circle from Germany, Canada, London, and now back in Germany. And we chose the University of Bonn because it has a very strong background in memory research and cognitive neuroscience. And we could imagine living here for a while with our kids. And so I embarked on a clinical training. And since 2018, I'm struggling to keep the balance between the clinical side. I'm now a psychiatrist since last year. I finished my specialty. I have my research group concurrently established during that time. I acquired my own funding. As a clinician, you only have clinical time, and it's very difficult to do research while doing clinical work. But there are funding opportunities for clinicians to rotate out of the clinical world to do part-time research. So I did that, and now I have 10 people in my lab. I have a postdoc, 2 PhD students, master students, and medical doctoral students. And I have a permanent position, but it's a clinical permanent position. So I'm not, strictly speaking, a research permanent position. I'm still working on this part. But I'm quite happy here. I'm quite happy in Bonn. I'm quite happy that I can do exactly the projects that I would like to do with the people I'd like to have. And I'm applying for funding, and at the moment I have enough funding to do my research. So yeah, that's where I am now.
Thank you so much. I think without the slides, we were anyways. I actually had the opportunity to listen to you in person in Bonn as part of a summer school, thanks to NeurotechEU. You talked about your memory research. It was also enlightening.
Thank you.
Before asking the audience, meanwhile, maybe they can type in the chat if they have questions. I want to ask your opinion about, since you moved from Germany to Canada and to UK and to Germany back, how valuable do you think these international experiences are in a researcher's career?
They're both advantaged and disadvantaged. I think, like, every time you move labs, then, or at least in my experience, you have also quite a setback. So the people who started the PhD in Canada, they were Canadians and they did their PhD in Canada. They all have now their own labs for many years. They are faculty there, so it's a little bit more streamlined if you stay in one environment. You know the people and everything. Every time you move, you also have to establish yourself new again in the new environment. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to miss my international experience. Like, also the other speakers showed how many international collaborations they have, and I can just attest to that. My best friend lives in Montreal, the other best friend in Sydney. Just because we met and then we all move away, and so this global network gets much more established. And I think for any individual, it's really beneficial to have seen different worlds, different styles of work, and different ways of living too.
Thank you so much. How about the audience? Okay, I think we're good to go. Continue.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Cornelia, once again. Then we have the... Okay, so for the next talk, we have Anahita, who's a professor at the University of Lille in France. And her research is focusing on neurocognitive mechanisms of spoken communication. So again, today we will listen to her career journey, and I just welcome Anita again.
Hello, thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
So thank you for your invitation. I'm very glad to participate in this event on this important date. I am an associate professor at the University of Lille in north of France. I'm in the medical faculty, and I am a member of a cognitive science and affective science lab. Before talking about my trajectory, I would like to talk a little bit about my field of research. My work is on the neurobiology of language. This field provides us with important insights about how we understand and we produce speech and language. And I also work in communication disorders caused by brain diseases, in particular in Parkinson's disease, with colleagues in Lille. So this area is important because it helps us to understand the mechanisms that underline our ability to communicate effectively. And regarding my background, I was born in Iran and I'm an engineer by training. My undergraduate training was in computer science at Sharif University. And so I didn't think about it this time. I didn't think about neurocognitive mechanisms and these things. But during my studies, by reading and by assisting in some talks, I became familiar with the field of cognitive science, which is an interdisciplinary approach to study mind. And I was very interested in this field because of its interdisciplinary approach, which involves psychology, linguistics, computer science, neuroscience. And I decided to continue my training in this field. So I decided to come to France in Grenoble to study cognitive science as an undergraduate student. And I did an internship by chance on speech sciences. And I really enjoyed it, the scientific field and also the environment. I worked on how people perceive speech and audiovisual aspects and all the stuff about multisensory perception. And that's why I decided to do a PhD on the same field and in the same lab, actually, in Grenoble. And I applied for PhD funding, and I obtained it, and so I could pursue in a PhD. And after my PhD, I wanted to stay in academia, and I did 2 postdocs. One in a Neurospin Center in Paris, where I studied I did some research with infants using electrophysiological measures and regularity processing. And then I had another postdoc in Belgium in the University of Ghent. And there too, it was a postdoc on audiovisual speech perception using EEG. So these postdoc PhD and these postdocs were very interesting, and the geographical mobility was interesting. But at that time, I wanted to be more settled, and I applied for a permanent position. I wanted to apply for a permanent position. And maybe something interesting for this event is to mention that I had some family reasons and some geographic constraints. So it was difficult to decide where to apply for a permanent position, as my husband is also in academia and he obtained his position before me. So I was very constrained. So I applied for a few positions in north of France, and I think it was a very kind of chance, and fortunately, I could find an associate professor position at the University of Lille exactly as I wanted. So I think if at this time I didn't find this position, I would have less opportunity to stay in academia because of the birth of my children. As we know, maternity leaves can affect the career, and for a few years you could have less publications and less mobility, less conferences and these things. So I think one of the reasons that I could continue my career was the fact that at a good time I had a position that I could have. I could continue and also have children's at that time. So now I'm an associate professor, and as I mentioned, my work is on neurobiology of language. To have my own projects, I applied for some national funding, and we managed to have these findings to work in communication disorders caused by Parkinson's disease. Our objective is to identify the neurocognitive mechanisms which underlie these communication disorders, and also after this project, we hope we can suggest some therapeutic programs for rehabilitation. In our work, we use EEG and behavioral experiments. There are 2 PhD students and several master's students in psychology and also in speech and language pathology fields who works on this project. And maybe one challenge also to mention is to obtain higher positions in academia for female. Even in the fields in which women are well presented in early career stages, they are relatively less represented in higher positions, such as a full professorship. And I think there are some awareness about that, which could lead to a more balanced representation of women in higher positions, and I think the improvements at individual and also at institutional levels can lead to have more women in our fields of research. Thank you again for the invitation. I'm very be happy to discuss, and if there is any question.
Thank you so much for the talk, and it's great to learn about your career journey for us. If you have any questions, we can have them now. If not, we can always answer them later.
Yes. Thank you again, Anahita. So we have the last speaker for this session, and I would like to invite Danelia, who's a professor at Boğaziçi. I don't know how to say this name. University.
Boğaziçi, soft G.
Boğaziçi University. It's a very difficult name for me.
Yeah, sure.
And your research includes human research, preclinical imaging, and animal models of psychiatric and neurological disease. And today you will share your journey with us. So welcome, Daniela.
Okay, I'm going to share slides.
Sure. I'm stopping my screen share.
Yeah, Okay, let me try. Okie doke. I'm trying to get it on full screen. Here we go. Let me find my pointer. I think I will need it. I'll take this. Okay. Yeah, so what you see there is actually a conversation I had with my advisor. And I'll ask you, will you actually know when you made it? My career started approximately 53 years ago when I was born. So for the completion of my background, and because it often leads to confusion, I want to say I'm born and raised in Germany. I went to a high school that bears the name of a famous physicist. Well, there I had a physics teacher whose favorite sentence was, and he repeatedly said, that women belong behind the stove. I hated physics, but I had a deep appreciation for psychology, literature, and the arts. My first stop was in Rome, Italy. I had a dream of studying there. I met the Pope. But even before I went there, I actually met someone who would later introduce me to this beautiful campus at Boğaziçi University, where I actually ended up studying psychology. I want to show you something. This is the Engelhard Welzel, or whatever they're called, World Cultural Map. You may or may not know it, but it measures many countries across 2 dimensions. One of the dimension is the survival versus self-expression dimension. I've circled all our NeurotechEU countries, and you can see that Germany, where I come from, loads up together with a few other countries on a very high level of self-expression. This is so important to us. And you only know what luxury it is when you start moving across the world and you actually go to Turkey and study psychology there. So this is a country that loads much more highly on the survival dimension, which means that people there will value physical and economic security much more than self-expression. This seems to be a luxury good that comes with some sort of, economic development. So I was a self-expressed person studying psychology in Turkey, which nobody understood. I was repeatedly asked why I wouldn't study engineering, because that's how you could prosper, right? So I learned very early to stand up for what I am and swim against the stream. I felt very lucky during my time at Boğaziçi. I got interested in biological psychology / behavioral neuroscience very early in my studies, undergrad times. And lucky because just when I was a junior student, a person returned from the US. He came from Columbia University and opened a lab, a biological psychology lab in the university. And that's where I learned to work with vets and develop my interest for the field. I decided to pursue behavioral neuroscience because I found it the most challenging among psychology disciplines. For me, it was like that. And I figured, thinking that I'll have a career that will last 50, 60 years, how will I not get bored during this time? So I figured, pick the most challenging thing to do and you won't get bored. So I did. How did I end up back in my hometown in Düsseldorf? Well, coincidence, as many of my life changes are based on. It's just my mentor from Istanbul met my advisor to be in Germany, somewhere in the United States. They invited each other. They didn't invite me, but I heard about it. And so I dropped by my then to be PhD Advisors Institute, and I landed a job as a PhD student. Good for me. There, I studied aging, normal aging, both on the biology side and the behavioral side. It's a topic I still get excited about today. I co-developed the sliding window correlation method, which allows you to detect non-monotonous relationships in data. I co-developed the extinction-induced despair model of depression, which views the loss of negative reinforcement as a source of stress and despair. So, I really started dabbling with method development at that time already, but I didn't yet identify as a methods development person. And that actually happened here at Brookhaven National Lab. Ironically, it's best known as a physics lab. There, I worked in the medical department. I didn't plan to go there. Actually, I applied for jobs in Germany and was asked to work in New York, which I happily accepted at that time. I was going to, and I did, study an animal model of depression, which was quite special, the congenitally helpless rat. I did study it. I imaged it. I learned to run a 9.4T MRI doing spectroscopy. But my real breakthrough really came with this thing over here. It's called the rat cap, so rat and a cap. It's a positron emission tomograph. And I will probably not forget that moment, but a group of physicists and engineers and chemists found me in the lab because they heard I was a behavior person, and they showed me a prototype of the scanner. The scanner at that time was under development for 10 years, but it was almost to go online, except they couldn't make it work with rats. Several people had tried, and they put this prototype into my hand, and they said, "Can you make it work with rats?" And I looked at it and I was so amazed. I thought, wow, if a rat would have it on the head, we could literally look into the brain while the animal is doing something, while it's awake and walking around and solving problems. And I thought, that's the dream of a behavioral neuroscientist, right? It's real time looking and studying the brain, looking into and studying it and knowing how behavior is reflected in it. Well, that wasn't their demands, really. Their demands was, how can we hold the scanner on the head? Several groups have tried and it wouldn't work. And all they wanted really was, put it on a rat that is still and sits there, is awake, maybe conscious. That was sort of the key term. And that was all they wanted. Well, I did that. I solved the problems very rapidly, but I wanted more. And some called me as the person who swam against the stream for years. I convinced these senior scientists that there was benefit in developing a method I ended up calling behavioral neuroimaging, which is what I told you about, looking at the dynamics in the brain related to behavior. Well, we developed many of the tools and methods necessary to get there. I worked with the team. They worked with me to fulfill my needs and wishes, which was great. We ended up publishing the work in Nature Methods. It was featured in Nature News. We had an interview with the New York Times. I won an NIH grant of the R series and R21. That's an innovation grant. I was still a postdoc, and I had $500,000 under my hood. at that time, I started identifying as a methods development person. And I thought I had made it. And then we were closed down for medical research in our facilities. You know, Brookhaven is a government lab, one of 10 United States government labs. And under President Obama, we were closed down at the expense of biofuel research. So just they had decided that we should change into doing something else. Our group, which was really my support group, disappeared into wherever. People retired, found jobs, moved. I had that money to spend, right? So I found a home at Stony Brook University, which is nearby to Brookhaven. But problem was they didn't have a pet center. So I had a home, but I couldn't do my work. So I looked around. I found Yale University. They took me in. They have a great pet center. And we actually ran a few studies there. But I knew my time was running out there. If you want to take a look at this map, Long Island, that's where I was located. Brookhaven is that green little spot here. Stony Brook is about here. That's where I lived. And Yale is in New Haven, right across the water. But to get there, I had to start driving at 3 a.m. in the morning, and we were scanning the whole day, and I had to drive back, and it took me 2 days to recover from each single PET scan. I knew I wouldn't last, and I knew I had to make a change and to go home. So that's what I did. I went and I took the first job in Istanbul, my first job in Istanbul. Actually, I went to a private school called Yeditepe University. It really is a teaching university. You teach a lot there. I knew pretty quickly that in my heart, I'm a researcher. And that wasn't quite satisfied with the teaching load I had at Yeditepe, which was 5 courses a semester and so on. However, I'm not, you know, I'm still grateful for the time I had there. I developed my teaching skills. That's one thing. But also I had time to recuperate, reorient, figure out what I really wanted. And also, I actually started doing human research at that time. So until then, I was just an animal researcher. And all of a sudden, I was starting to do human research, which came with the fact that I was in the Department of Psychology over there. So I continued developing methods. One of my research lines was in depression. So I was interested in motivation in particular. I developed a behavioral task that would allow you to assess how cognitively effortful a person would want to be. And I developed my first questionnaire called HEFFORT, which is the Hedonia and Effort Questionnaire, which allows us to dissect psychological compounds mathematically. This is not published yet. It's in the works. But then, I knew I had to go back to sort of a top-level research institution. That's where I was propelled to be. And I found my old home, Boğaziçi University, and my new home, which was the Institute of Biomedical Engineering, which held the promise that I could continue my psychology, neuroscience work. I could add the interdisciplinary work with all the different natural sciences as I was used to back in the US, plus add new ideas and inspirations that I wouldn't have in a more familiar area. So I went there happily. I became assistant professor for the 3rd time in my life. And I was finally able to shake that title off me a couple of years later. I stopped asking the question whether I made it. I still develop methods. I still work with rats and humans. These are my current research foci. In my lab, I develop an experience-dependent method of deep brain stimulation for advanced Parkinson's disease. I also develop a lifespan atlas for female rats within our big platform called the Neurotechnological Solutions Platform, which is coordinated by John Ujesoy. You might know him from NeurotechEU. So this is a big grant where, you know, really many research groups contribute to. And my human research, well, I am the coordinator of iNavigate. That's a EU grant with a big consortium. But within it, I run a human study which tries to understand how humans navigate in surprising, unpredictable environments. And perhaps some of you might know me through the last study. It's actually a research I run within NeurotechEU. I'm trying to understand the challenges of our NeurotechEU nations, and specifically their challenges regarding neurotechnological advances. What do they need? Do they trust us? What do they know about it? And so on. Throughout my career, I had male mentors. I'm grateful for them. There's Richard at Boisice, Joe in Düsseldorf, and the scientists at BNL. I always thought, you know, at one point in my career, I'll be like them. You know, if I just achieved this and did that, until I realized I'll never be like them. I'm a woman. These are men. We're different. So I think realizing this has really changed my outlook on life. I probably have a louder voice now, which not everyone appreciates. I am trying not to feel judged by anyone, and I really care about being my most authentic self, and to contribute to the world as much as I can. And in conclusion, what I would like to give you from my experiences is that a career isn't simply degrees to obtain or awards to win. It's a path. And if I can recommend anything to you, it's to compete with yourself and not others. Competition is actually it's actually a form of aggression. I'm not sure some of you know that, and it's so typical of males, even male rats, but not females, no female rats. So anyways, I recommend that you do not copy men, because you'll never be one. And instead, just try to become the best version of yourself, whatever you're called to do. And with that, I say thank you for listening and the invitation. Thanks.
And thank you for accepting our invitation and giving us this nice talk. And also thank you for the last recommendations. I think it's something to think about for us.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
With that, we have come to the end of the career presentation session. And I just want to ask everyone to please fill out the form where you just enter your name, institution, and what are you studying. That's all, I promise. It's for reporting purposes. If we have any questions to Daniela, we can have them. You can write or unmute yourself. If not, we will have a coffee break. It will last about 30 minutes, and we'll see you after that break. Hope to see everyone back here again. Thanks again to all the speakers.
Yes. Thank you, and see you in a while.
See
See you.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Welcome back, everyone. I think everyone is here. I think we can start with our next session. Elif, are you ready for that?
Yeah, I'm here. We can start. We will have the panel discussion session now. We have some questions that we want to direct them to the speakers, and any of the speakers is welcome to answer. Meanwhile, the audience can write their questions to the Q&A, and then we'll answer them once we are finished with the panel session. The panel session will last until the time difference. I think it will be 12:30 Central European time. And we will have 15 minutes for questions. Okay, are the speakers here? Let me check.
Yes, I think.
We are missing Dr. Pinar. Maybe wait another minute for her. The number of attendees has decreased. That is sad. If there are any newcomers, could you
Maybe
please...
people confuse the time, you know, initially you announced an hour longer as a break.
Yeah.
So I just texted Pinna, but she hasn't picked up yet.
Yeah, I'm also in touch with her. I think she'll join very shortly. Yeah, the time we had a slight delay when we finished the speaker's lecture session. And then actually there was a secret coffee break within the panel. It was not written in the program that we advertised, but here we are within this session, panel session. We will have about 40 minutes now. I think it should be enough. But yeah, maybe the program was a little bit misleading.
Elif, can you send the link for the Zoom to Pinar? She seems to be missing it. I don't have it at hand.
Sure. Yeah.
She's already here, right?
Great. Welcome back, everyone. Now we have some questions that we will address to the speakers. Hopefully, they will facilitate some fruitful discussions. Vivek, you're on.
All right, so I'll go to the first question, which is about women in science often feel like they're not belonging, imposter syndrome. Why would it be different to men in science? You're open to initiate. If not, I can actually okay, we can start with Christiana. Yeah.
I can comment, I guess. So I think this idea of imposter syndrome has been discussed a lot, including whether the term is actually accurate or I think again, and then of course none of us can speak for the men, but at least I know one man who also feels it. So which is my partner, who's also a young academic. So I think when we're talking about imposter syndrome, it deals with the aspect of not feeling welcome and not feeling like you belong in a place, and that can come from anywhere, and one can feel that for many different reasons. The reality for women, I think, has been that in fact we don't belong in academia. So that's not just the impression of it, but the reality of it. I think things are moving and changing. But I remember being a PhD student and looking for female mentors and having a really hard time to find them in the more senior leadership. And I've been lucky to find some female mentors, and that's been instrumental for my career. But I think that's part of the reason why we're doing this, so people feel more like they belong by seeing other people like them, women or other minorities that they feel represent them. But as far as the imposter syndrome, I think that's we're talking about mental illnesses, and so this feeling, this anxiety we feel, this thing is to a certain degree intrinsic. That happens to anybody in a new and competitive career. So yeah,
I completely agree. Like the feeling can be a part of anything, but the belonging is the reality that it's not there, and yeah, we are getting there. But of course, I think that's true.
I would like to say something about the man, though. Sorry. Did you want to say more, Christiana?
No, I just wanted to actually point to you, because you made a point about this at the end of your talk, and I think that was really important what you said. I think we're just thinking of it wrong, and maybe you can continue on that discussion.
Yeah, I just, rather than responding to the first sentence in this question, I wanted to respond to the second part here. Why would it be different to men in science? As I have worked with men throughout, and had all these many different interactions and experiences with men, and that doesn't only include human interactions. Even, you work with female rats and you have male reviewers asking, while it is obvious that almost no research has been done on female animals, and whole medicine is about men, the moment you want to inject research on females, you get questioned by the reviewers as to, and how about the man? It's like, oh my God. And people wanting to trash your research because you work with female animals. And I've had really so many encounters where, what I want to say is, why would it be different to man? Because it's made by man. Most of everything we get used to, starting from giving a talk, standing up in an authority manner, and not allowing for emotions or fear. People dropping out if they do have fear, and feel overwhelmed and mistreated. Well, why would it be different for men? Because they made it in the past. And what I noticed is that if we had run the show, things would look very different. And, I keep reminding myself that if men were that great, well, we wouldn't have any problems in this world because it's made by them. So, you know, I firmly believe that we can do a different job, a better job, an equally good job, certainly a different job that might be so beneficial to men and women. You know, and just recognizing this for me really took the fear out of it. You know, I think we have so much work to do, making women feel comfortable. I've had so many experiences from, you know, wanting to turn a screw into an apparatus and males going, let me do it, let me do it. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? Other than the reviewer example, or just knowing that how many experiences it takes women to move ahead in their career past PhD. You know, I think until PhD, it is a lot easier and you're treated more fairly of sorts, because there's oversight, right? But after that, you're in the job market, and I just see how many women drop out. But it's also, that's where the competition really starts. And, you know, counting my years trying to climb into an associate professor position, while I know so many men have done so much less and just advanced so quickly, I often feel, why is it so different to men in science? Because they reward each other, and women do that too, by the way. You know, there's a really nice documentary on Netflix. I sometimes like to refer to Netflix because they talk about so many great experiences. But picturing a scientist, watch it if you haven't yet. This is the story told by women scientists and their experiences there. And they also show data, which demonstrates that not only men favor men and there is discrimination from the man's side, but women do that too, which made me notice, look, we have to wake up. We can't be like them and copy them. Really, we can't afford it. And we shouldn't, because we lose so much talent over this, just by trying to be what we are not. Yeah, that's why would it be different to men? Because they made it. They invented the system. That's what I have to say.
Right. I can completely agree on that.
I would also like to add something just briefly to that, because I don't feel that I don't belong, and I think it's also quite an important feeling. I don't want to also just comment on what you guys had said, and I think it's really important. And I saw the Netflix series as well, and agree with you. But I don't feel like an imposter. I think women belong in science, and I think it's actually, if you can make it happen through the constraints and whatnot, I think it's a very open and flexible working environment where childcare is okay, and it works out, because it's, or at least in my field, it's also quite a flexible job. So I think actually women do belong in science, also with family and partners and all that comes with a life.
Yeah.
I agree with you about the flexibility, certainly with having a family. I think this as has also changed a lot in the recent, let's say, 10, 20 years, because there are more and more places where you have payment structures where you could take parental leave and still not lose your career and everything. So then we're definitely in the right direction. I'm now in Sweden, which actually has really good conditions for parental leave for both men and women, which is actually very important to note that if in countries where there's excellent parental leave just for women, what ends up happening is that they take the career hit, right? So here the two parents share the possibility to take parental leave, which I think is really nice. A big difference from Canada, where I had my first kid, for example. Yeah. So I agree that it's very flexible, and I'd encourage everybody to consider family planning during their career. Um, but I think the key is to planning, the word planning, because you have to kind of work around the timelines of your career in an informed way. Yeah, which is a bit more pressure on women still than on men, because we end up, especially when it comes to childcare, we do end up having to take the bulk of the biological weight, if not even the psychological, right? So yeah, so planning is key. But I agree with you; it is flexible once you know the format to work around.
Yes.
I would like to ask you something, Christian, those with the kids. I decided very early that I would not have kids. I never had the desire. That's one thing. I needed, one reason I think, because I know I need the space and time for my brain to work properly so that I can think and write. I have no clue how do you write manuscripts with kids around that, want something all the time. I cannot imagine how one can integrate the two things and be happy. So, so that's where my question is I mean, asking from the standpoint of someone who won't have kids and is absolutely happy with that and doesn't question the choice at all. I wonder about your very honest perspective on that. Like, how many times have you questioned it? Are you really happy with that? And, because you say planning, but I'm thinking, again, in terms of women, are you just following, are you really emancipated? Are you self-expressed enough to know that this is what you really want? Or are you really just following society's rules, So I wonder, so I would be happy if you can truly express what these experiences were like, and not, according to some norm that you think will inspire the new generation, who I know struggle a lot when kids come around and many women drop out. I think we need to say that too. So how did you manage? How did you feel about it, given that you stayed in the system with kids?
Mm. I mean, I can certainly start, but I think there's others who can comment. As to your point about whether you truly feel like it's a reflection of yourself, I think that's a really hard question to answer, because the brain works in funny ways. We tell ourselves something and then we believe it. And so it's really hard to say, well, I did this because society told me to, and I did this one because I wanted it. At the end of the day, you have the outcomes of your things that happen to you and things that you chose. And I can say for the outcomes that I am very happy that those were my steps in life. I was lucky that I could plan the moments when they happened, but I know for most people that's not the reality. And so even though I say planning, of course, you have to, let biology take its course. And sometimes it takes years to conceive, even when you really, really want to. But yeah, I think, having being on the other side of it, it was definitely challenging, but I'm happy with the way my life and family works. Had I not had children, I would have moved faster through the steps of my career, no doubt. And I maybe would have had a different, no, I don't know if that would have affected productivity, because, you change how you manage your time. So I don't write papers with babies yelling at me. I mean, I write them hidden away in a closed room, or I, play music and headphones, right? And so I think you find a different version of yourself, whatever life throws at you, or whatever you choose. So there's different formulas for how to be successful in academia and how to be successful as a human being. And I guess it only matters what you feel like in yourself, so you're happy how you've chosen to go, and I'm happy like this. And we're both successful. So I think there's both ways, right? I don't know if the others can comment.
I don't think I also have the answer, but when I started my career, I never wanted to have kids. I also didn't want to have a partner or something like that. But then I just simply fell in love, and I think that was the main reason for me to engage in that behavior with a 3 years long distance relationship between Canada and Germany with the time difference of 6 hours. It was very difficult. And so when we finally were in the same continent, in the same city, that was really, really great for us. And at some point, we decided to have kids together. And yeah, and I think that's the key thing for me, that these are our kids. These are not just my kids. And if you look at how much maternity leave I took and how much time my husband put into the kids in terms of taking time out of work, he has the majority of time, and I could further my career. I do think sometimes in funding agencies, I ask how long did you take maternity leave? I would always like to say since birth. Like, I don't go to conferences as much as I would do without kids, or I can't write manuscripts in the evenings or something like that. I have my working day, and it's from 8 to 5 o'clock, and that's it. And there's not much wiggle room around this. But nonetheless, like, if I look around me here in my office, I do have my 2 kids here hanging on the wall, and they look at me. They're now 11 and 7, and it gets easier too. Like, when they're really small, they do take up quite a lot of space. And then also you get sick all the time, right? When they start childcare and things like that. But now they come home and they tell me what they experienced in school. And I think it's also really nice for me to have a different life and not just science, like have this balance of coming home to another world somehow. Exactly.
Yes, of course. I mean, that you have without kids too, right? No question. We all need balance in life. However, we just take it differently if we don't have kids, you know.
Yeah, that's for sure. I also wanted to say I have 2 daughters, and I do think I somehow feel quite often that I also have a responsibility to show to them how it's possible that the man and the woman are taking a shared load in living a life that is fulfilling for both partners. That I do feel quite often.
Okay. Do we have any comment from the audience if they want to make a note on this question or ask anything? Okay. Then we can go to the next question.
Okay. I don't think we'll be able to cover all the questions, so I just want to pick a question. This is actually a matter of curiosity to me too, and I would like to hear your thoughts and experiences about this. Why do you think there is a tendency for women to be employed on short-term contracts rather than long-term? If there is such a thing, of course.
Because they're more likely to accept, because we have to take everything we get, and men can pick the cream. They're offered, you know, this is part of the discrimination we experience. But then again, it depends. I mean, there is always so much complexity around every issue you mentioned, right? And there's always, you know, one thing and there's another story that will be completely different. For example, my contract in Turkey is never longer than a year, but that's not related to me being a woman or man. It's simply related to me being a foreigner in Turkey. It's how Turkey works for foreigners. I mean, it doesn't work. So, but that's the condition which I accept, while, you know, others may just say, I'm not going to do it. And, you know, I've been in this position many times. I remember as a to-be doctoral student in Germany. So I came from Istanbul. I had, luckily, my parents were supporting me there. And then I came to Düsseldorf. And there, actually, all the PhD students had pay and they were on contracts. And what I didn't know at that time, you know, the better contract was the one with half a position. Then they had a 13th salary end of the year, and they had health insurance or whatever. And I came there and I was offered a scholarship, which paid like half as much, didn't have the 13th salary, and I had to pay private insurance from that due to some loophole in the German system. And thankfully, my advisor compensated me somewhat. But see, I remember very well a colleague of mine who I spoke with, he said, I do not want this contract. And I said, I take whatever I can get. You know, I came from, I'm German, but I was always called the Turk. Just kind of funny. It's a Joe thing, you know, but I just took it. I was used to fighting my way through the world, and I still do that. To get what I want, I accept compromises. And I know many people do not. Sometimes it's women that do not, but more often it's men that do not, because they have so much opportunity and they just know how to beat this world. They know how to compete in the world. And I don't. I didn't. And I have other priorities than them. Again, I'm not a man. You know, I don't care as much as about economic or other security as some other people, my colleagues or students from here might. I have different priorities because I grew up well fed. So I have the luxury to afford other ways of thinking. But I do think it's a choice rather than, you know, you will just walk. I mean, unless you really have to take a short-term contract, or, you know, if you're not tolerant, you won't. Men typically are not tolerant of being mistreated. They're used to be treating well, to be treated well. That's just how it is, in my view.
Maybe that
Maybe I can add a comment about this question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
besides the short-term contracts, the women have more part-time contracts too, and that impacts also career. I mean, and I think part-time contracts may be more related to family-related issues, but they accept more part-time contracts too.
So do you think it's a choice rather than it's like given from the employer?
I don't know. I don't know data about that, but I think in my experience, it's more the choice, the choice of colleagues, and more related to family-related issues. But I don't know the data actually about that. Yeah. But in France, for example, we know that women have more part-time contracts, but not just in academia, in all type of contracts.
I think women mostly feel more like they should be involved within the like home chores, or maybe the responsibility of a child might be more of a what can I say, time-consuming side job for them. And also, I feel like that men need the financial stability, for the social standing of themselves. Maybe that's why they are mostly tended to accept longer term contracts, and for women, maybe they do not care if it's a long term or short term. It's similar to the point of view of what said. Do we have any other opinions on this topic?
I mean, I don't know the statistics, but I know there were some studies done regarding bias in hiring in academia, right? And so and that bias comes from evaluators that are both male and female. And so I think when that needs to be accounted for in this discussion, perhaps, where if there, when there's a permanent position is considered to be more competitive, then there tends to be a bias where let's say men are seen as more favorable toward these kinds of positions. I think there's a lot of work being done by a lot of institutions to try to make people aware of these biases so that kind of hiring doesn't happen. But it is possible that women are also offered the less desirable positions, and then of course people take them because they need a position or whatever. But that's probably has to do with the local structure, for example. So the discussion about Germany reminded me about my time there as a postdoc, where I did actually I was just very proactive in bringing in independent funding, and that somehow affected my career because in Germany you increase your salary scale by career time, and within that system as a foreigner I lost time by being independently funding that. So taken the position that was fully salaried through the German system as opposed to bringing funding from outside, I would have moved faster up the salary ladder, which is counterintuitive in a competitive structure. So now I urge all the students and postdocs to pay attention to this so that they aren't getting, they're not getting decreased. But I think, so part of it is nobody told me to watch out for it because maybe I didn't have the mentors that were thinking of it from that perspective. So that's maybe part of it as well, is the mentorship is obviously, when you're a minority, you have less mentors that understand what you're going through. And it's more of an imperative to find them.
I think that's a very good point. I would underline it. How do you say? I would sign off on it.
Do we have any more contributions?
Yes,
Okay.
right. Yeah, I can answer the next question. Maybe on the question on the previous slide, if you can just go back to the previous one. Yeah, so I think this is a question I would like to discuss. Like, are there a minority in your workplace? Because this is something I think I face in my workplace, that it always remains a minority. And also whenever I go to like I've been to recent conferences, and then I realize, okay, all the audience or even the speakers, when you go to a conference, they are all men. And like I end up once in a conference where it was huge, completely all the speakers and so many people, and literally I think there was just one woman, and it was like I was like, okay, I was shocked, like, okay, what's happening? And generally you go to a conference, they call the prominent speakers in your field, and those prominent speakers tend to be men, and of course you have been calling them again and again, and they become prominent. So I don't know how to break this chain, and what do you think about it?
We need to become more conscious of who to invite. Yeah, and that is what you're reporting there, that's been shown statistically, right? So women are overgone, they're not chosen to speak, and you're right, we are not given the same opportunities. I've observed this many times, you just wait in the background, you kind of wait until you're called, and you're never called, and you get used to that. until you realize you do have to simply put yourself out there. And that's what I'm saying. You have to be a woman and not copy men. Don't be in their system. Think for yourself, be there, be yourself, show them who you are. Don't wait for them, plan your own conference, open your own journal. And there's so much we need to do to fight the system, because it's true, we are overcome. But in part, I think we are too accepting of that too. And I think we are always very afraid of looking bad when we say something. We always feel that guilt, and we are made to feel like we are weird because we are different, always that, oh, those emotional women, right? Isn't that bad? And yeah, I think we are under-selected, and therefore we don't show, and therefore we have less on our CVs. And looking at my workplace in particular, I thought from the beginning of being at the biomedical engineering, these are all very great people, and I like my colleagues very much. They're all accomplished. But if you just look at the titles, the only full professors, except one, are males. And we are equal workforce at least, or we are getting to be even a majority of women. But the women are all assistant and associate. We wait for long, long times to be promoted. And males get in there 1 year, 2 publications, and they have their positions. It's just ridiculous. But even if it wasn't like that, and you wanted to speak of objectivity, just count the number of male professors and the number of female professors, and it's leaking a story, and you wonder, well, why? And then you look at those professors' CVs, and some of them are very weak. Some of them are great, but by comparison to the women, you have the same thing, but they don't have that title. And it's just this is one reason why I decided that we need to relax about those, because the system is not fair. And we really need to do other things. We need to just do our work and enjoy it and contribute and make it worthwhile. Because if you're stuck with these outcomes, then you can get so disappointed. So yeah, I think women are a minority, not necessarily number anymore, although it could be, but I don't think in my area, surprisingly, even our students, many of them are now females. But those, that make it, in quotes, these are all males. Yeah. Or yeah, there's clear difference there.
Yeah. Anyone else want to contribute?
I just basically want to agree, like in medicine, particularly as well, it's quite a steep hierarchy, and yeah, if you go to the upper ladders, it's all male. And they of course have lots of female assistant physicians, but then if you want to be a leading physician, then you have the wrong sex if you're female.
I think, or I hoped that we are in a period of change, and this event being an example of that, of drawing attention to this issue. And so in my field, it's the same. It's kind of a 50-50 up until PhD, and then starts to drop off. And now I'm an assistant professor for a year and a half, and it's really to find women around me, and somehow I just find them. And so I've realized that that there is a tide for change. Since I started my journey, I see a lot more women, and I think these women that are not yet in career positions of power will get there by the time those of you in the audience are, at this level. And we just have to do our part to push other women. So I just, when I realized this, I started to work. I work with a lot of women, and honestly, I understand also now why this is the way it is. I also like working with women. I understand why men like working with men. I think they understand each other maybe, and so not everybody's doing it to be hurtful or even intentionally. And at some point, I felt sort of guilty for surrounding myself with too many women and being sort of sexist in that way. And then I realized that we have to champion, we have to champion other people. And I see that women don't make the career jump as much. So I'm hopeful in championing other people, other women's careers. And so, for example, I was asked to chair a session at an upcoming conference, and I just invited only women for my session. Or I submit symposia, and I have only women on my symposium. So hopefully, that conference you go to next will have more and more speakers who are women, if people do that, because it's still unbalanced. But we're talking about a couple of decades of career time, and so those people in positions of leadership have moved up, and there were no women around who could even speak up and fight, I think, around that time, because they were excluded from these positions. And now we have more opportunities, and we need to fight to get those positions and then promote other women along the path.
Well, at the same time, I think we also need to be careful not to become sexist, as you say, the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, actually what made me more conscious is coordinating an EU grant. They take statistics, gender distributions for each partner, how many in the workforce and so on. And that taught me to pay more attention to it. And I realized, just surrounding yourself by women is not a good idea either. I mean, we do need to learn to feel equal with each other, and we need to do our part there too. I also sometimes see that women can also become quite nasty, I sometimes think that's when they copy the man, that's because they couldn't really develop themselves. I think we also need to, that's just, one token here, but I think we need to work on ourselves to contribute to making the work area a good area for both sexes. I think that's really important, and it's tough. I work in a country that's very patriarchal, and I'm trying to be equal about male-female student distributions in my lab and work efforts. And it can work very, very nicely with certain men, and then you meet that patriarch and it just goes to hell, because they can't listen to you. It's so difficult for them to take you serious. They're a kid, you're a senior, and they still wouldn't take you serious. So those things happen, and I have no solution for that. I think one just needs to let them go to improve the workforce.
And I think it's also equally important, I think, I agree, like pushing the boundaries is yes, but I think it's also equally important to work on the mindset of a general population, because otherwise, like, this is what we get. Like, we maintain equality in the workplace, male, female, and then they don't listen to your, these kind of things happen because of the mindset.
Yes, yeah, I fully agree. So this needs to be our part too, right? We need to speak up. We need to be ourselves, truly ourselves, so that we can represent our authentic woman style, whatever that is for everyone. That may be different. But I agree. There's a lot to be done for us as well. And yeah, mindset, of course, is very difficult to change a person overnight, but I think we do leave imprints, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I would like to add something on the conferences. I'm also organizing a symposium, and I try to invite females, but they all said no, they can't make it. Especially they can't make it in person. And then I asked the first man, and he immediately responded within half an hour, yes, of course I can do this. And I think that's the point that you mentioned with being ourselves. It's also okay not to attend to conferences if they don't fit in lives and schedules and things. And then those biases also sometimes come to be because, on the other hand, I think that men feel that they have to accept and they have to work as well, and they're allowed to work long hours and allowed to go to places overnight without talking to their families and stuff like that, right? So I think we have to keep that in mind if we're organizing conferences and also getting different outcomes there.
Yeah, and I think we have collecting rewards. Why do we even need to go and give talks?
Exactly,
Is there a purpose in it? You know, I start calling off meetings which I feel have no purpose other than displaying authoritarian behavior, you know? So yes, they will have many talks on their CVs, but is there purpose in all of that? Is you know, do we really need that? Many talks that are given are so bad. You know, it's like you're wasting your time. I think we are well advised to do other things instead. But this is still their system. So but I totally consider what we accept and what not. At the same time, we need to do things that are really meaningful for us and that really show us. So whatever that form is going to be in the future,
Exactly.
let's see.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think, Elif, do you think we have time for continuation of this discussion, or you want to shift to?
Actually, we have just moved to the quick Q&A session time-wise, but
Okay.
I think what we should do is, if we do have questions from the audience, they should speak up. Otherwise, we'll see. Let's just wait for a few seconds. If we don't have questions, I think we can take a short break until the breakout session. I know that some of the speakers won't be able to join the breakout room session, so I want to thank everyone for accepting to give a talk today, and you really guided us with the journey you have been through. I think it has been helpful for all of the attendees as well. So we'll meet again at 45 for the breakout rooms. Let's take a very short break.
All right.
Thank you. I won't be here for the breakout session, but thank you for organizing this event.
Thank you for joining. It has been really nice to listen to you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
We have left with a very intimate audience. Okay, since our speakers are also here, we can start. This seems like we are too few people to be in breakout rooms. So I suggest to make a better use of our time and speakers. We stay here in the main room instead of going to the breakout rooms and discuss the topics here maybe. We have half an hour dedicated to the breakout room session. I think it will be better that we'll discuss these in the main room. Okay, so let's set the topics.
I think we can touch upon each things that we decided in the breakout rooms, the themes, and one by one each theme. And I think we are anyway, we can finish that in half an hour.
How about family planning?
We can start with that.
Okay, it has already been discussed a little in the previous sessions, but I feel like it's of interest to the like all the women that plan to do this at a point in their lives. So here I would like to direct this topic to Christiana and just ask for general suggestions or comments on the topic that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to discuss in the previous section.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a bit already. I think, I guess maybe just the only point is that, you know, there's a bit of luck involved in the kind of partner you end up with and how supportive they are. And unfortunately, there's a lot of cultural differences. Some people face where, you know, they might not have as supportive of a partner. And I don't really know what to say about that. I think one needs to figure out what they want out of their lives and communicate that clearly and hope that they can make that happen and be flexible. But I don't know, it's a very general topic. I think family planning is a part of life. So whether you plan to have a family or not, it's part of it. So it's not an exclusion or an inclusion factor in academia.
By the way, questions from the audience are encouraged highly. So if you have any general wondering about the topic or a specific question to the speaker, please speak up. Otherwise, it is not a very moderated session. It is dedicated to the questions we might have. We have also the other topics that we plan to discuss. These are the glass ceiling and funding or applications. So I would like to initiate an open question session here where the audience can ask questions to our speakers.
Sorry, I couldn't understand. What are these topics?
Glass ceilings and funding applications.
What do you mean by glass ceilings?
That was also a new terminology to me, Daniela. I was like,
I assume it's like a limitation that's not
kind
official,
of,
but
yeah,
exists.
apparently.
Like you run into glass.
I was like, oh, is there yet another problem that I am not aware of about the women? Like,
yes, Pinar, do not run into the glass that's everywhere.
yeah.
Just
I think it refers to the salary sort of, or the career progression limit that certain groups of the society are sort of like, yeah, there's a limit as to where you can go. And then there's a piece of glass that just kind of, you can see the rest of the mountain, but it's not available to you. I think that's what the term refers to. But yeah, I don't know what you guys want to talk about in that context. I think that's a bit confusing to me as well.
I think it's like lesser on the PhD level than at the director level. So like the discrimination and the bias will make that more at the higher level, like the glass ceiling, and the lower ones are you'll feel okay, the world is doing great.
I also feel like from the terminology of glass, it's more for maybe for like a corporate life. Because that also like the glass walls or the buildings, skyscrapers, somehow that the word glass reminds me more the corporate life, and that of course progression in the profession there is also another problem similar to academia. So I feel like they came up with that terminology, not the research, not the scientists, like really.
That might be the case. I actually never thought of it that way, in case like the skyscrapers and all the corporate buildings, but it actually makes sense. But it's also a topic in the academia, since we have all the ladders of the career here too, from the PhD level, or from starting from the bachelor's level to the all the way up to the tenure track professor positions. I think we also discussed it when we talked about the long-term contracts. Are they available to women? And we also touched up about the minority of women in the tenure track positions. So it's not a freshly new topic for this group.
I think it's there. I think we discussed it, yeah. I was just thinking, you know, I remembered spontaneously the former central bank manager of Turkey, the woman who was just trashed by everyone. So, you know, she tried to rescue Turkey's miserable economy, which is purely, which is basically induced consciously. You know, it's not that we have to be such an inflational country. And so they put this woman in charge, and I always kept wondering why they would do it. And then, of course, you know, the responses were because there's going to be tough measures, so they're going to be more empathetic to it if it's a woman doing these, or, you know, it's like she's just a pawn or whatever. That's what you then hear, not because she has talent, of course. That wouldn't come up, right? So, you know, I think there are women that make it. Actually, Turkey was one of the first countries with a female president when I was a student many years ago. She screwed up, so. But, you know, think about it, in the US, they never had a female president yet. It's, you know, I think in science, it's the same thing. We have a long road to go, you know,